Not in recent history has the British Virgin Islands experienced devastation in the way they have experienced it over the past month. That is with Hurricane Irma and that of Maria and some storms that have hit the territory. But coming back is one thing that the territory is being very strong on and seems to be doing quite well. But then there are the lawmakers and the lawbreakers, the good and the bad, and there comes the responsibility of the security forces of the British Virgin Islands. And this afternoon, with this JTV News Hurricane Irma update, I am with none other than the Commissioner of Police himself, Mr. Michael Matthews, a man that I understand has been keeping himself very busy, or maybe the things in the territory have been keeping you very busy. What's got you so busy, Mr. Matthews?
Well, Kathy, great to see you again, and what an understatement, being very busy. I don't suppose there's many commissioners of police around the world that can put on their CV that they were in charge when the biggest hurricane ever recorded in the Atlantic hit a capital town. But that's, of course, exactly what happened here in the British Virgin Islands. And, we were forced to respond and we were tested to the limits. It tested me personally, it tested my officers, but we did respond. And initially, our response was around the rescue of people from the devastation and damage that had been caused by Hurricane Irma. And we were on the ground literally as soon as the winds dropped. And I was walking through the town around about 7 o'clock in the evening. The wind was still blowing. It was just got dark, and I was looking at the devastation, and it was like a war zone to me. And I was asking the officer walking with me, how are we going to recover from this? How on earth are we going to put this back together? But as you said in your opening remarks there, it's just incredible, the resilience of the people of the Virgin Islands and how quickly people are starting to stand on their feet. And of course, security of the territory is a key part of that. People need to feel safe, that they can get on with their lives, that they can open their businesses, that they can live in peace and harmony. That's been the biggest challenge for us, is tackling some of the security issues that come out as a result of Irma.
So tell me what strategies and systems that you were managed to put in place or are still putting in place to be able to effectively tackle those challenges.
Well, immediately after the first hurricane had struck, we were able to put a number of additional police officers on the street because we'd planned for it. That included, funnily enough, our 27 new recruits who had done a fantastic job during those first few days after the hurricane hit, having only just completed their training. But I was able also to see how well the rest of the force performed in responding. And as I say, our strategy then was around seeking to find people trapped in their homes, seeking to assist people with the removal of dangerous articles, and make the place as safe as possible, working alongside our colleagues in fire and rescue. However, sadly, and is a reflection of a very small percentage of society here, of course, we did have some crime. Very quickly, looting, as it's commonly known, where people took it upon themselves to break into homes and businesses and help themselves. Something that I was pretty disappointed, to say the least, that people here resorted to that. At a time when the territory was on its knees and people had suffered tremendously, people took advantage of that situation. So the other strategy has been, of course, to round up those looters and to prevent further looting. And we've been successful, we've been making arrests, and I made the unusual step of publishing details of people that we've arrested and charged and putting their photographs out for the media to see. And I think that's important. So I think the public need to understand that, these aren't people that have come from miles away to come here just to loot. These were people living here in our communities. And they weren't just expats. There were expats involved in that, but there was also local people involved in that. And those inquiries will continue, Kathy. I did an appeal some time back, about 2 weeks after the hurricane, asking for video footage and photographs, and we've been overwhelmed with the amount that's come in, and our intelligence team are working very, very long hours to piece together exactly what's happened, and we are identifying a lot of people. So further arrests, I anticipate, will be made.
Okay. In the area of traffic, I know that seems to be another key area of focus right now is still are seeing some of your officers on the streets. What is being done in traffic? Because we know the situation has been compromised in terms of the state of certain vehicles, and so traffic offenses are somewhat a little weighed, I would want to say. How are you tackling that?
Well, first of all, of course, I've got a lot of extra officers here at the moment. We have a total of 75 additional officers that have come to support us in policing the territory. That's about 55 from the UK, and the remainder are from the Cayman Islands and Bermuda. And can I say, just for the record, what a fantastic job they've done, and a big heartfelt thanks to the governments and the chiefs of police of those countries for assisting us. Now, you would think, therefore, that we could clamp down very quickly with those numbers on all of the problems here, both crime and traffic. However, I have asked my officers to act with discretion at the moment when it comes to traffic matters. We met a few days ago with the representatives of the insurers, together with the Commissioner of the Department for Motor Vehicles, and I know that the Commissioner has already approached Cabinet with a view to saying, you know, are we going to legally put some leniency in place? Now, that's a matter for Cabinet to determine, and I've not been instructed otherwise at the moment. And the reality is simply this. People have suffered an awful lot here in the territory, and I understand that, and I'm sympathetic to that. However, it reaches a point where some of the vehicles on the road are just dangerous. They are dangerous to the people using them, they are dangerous to other road users and other people on our streets. And sadly, I am going to have to enforce some laws, and we are going to have to deal with some of those more dangerous vehicles. So I make a simple request. Get your vehicle inspected. Go down to DMV, make sure that it can be licensed. Make sure your insurance is still valid, because, you know, there are people driving around here who think they've got insurance cover, but their vehicles may be illegal and their insurance may not be valid. But most of all, make sure your vehicle is safe. And if it's not safe, don't attempt to get into it, because if my officers do see you, we're going to reach a point where we're going to have to then deal with you through the law and place you before the courts. Now, I'm not seeking to do that. I'm not seeking to, you know, at a time when the recovery has begun, to start a massive traffic policing campaign. But I do have a responsibility for safety on our roads, and my officers will begin to show a greater level of enforcement than perhaps we've seen up until now.
Okay, I guess, well, these are things that are pieces that are coming together as the territory begins to move to a more comfortable position after such a devastation. But tell me a little bit more about crime. I know for a fact that we would have recorded one murder since Hurricane Irma.
Yes, that is correct. Very sadly, we had a murder in the east end of the capital here. A gentleman, Mr. Caesar, was shot in his home on the 10th of September and sadly succumbed to those injuries on the 12th of September. That's the 8th murder recorded in the territory this year, something I'm not particularly proud of. But serious crimes like a homicide, where somebody goes in someone's home with a firearm and shoots them, they're very, very difficult things to prevent. What we will obviously do is our very best to detect. Prior to Hurricane Irma, we'd been having a lot of success with detections around some of these serious crimes, and we have some very strong leads in that particular case as well. So I am hopeful that we will have some good news in the near future about bringing more offenders to justice around some of these more serious crimes.
Talk to me about guns and drugs on the streets right now.
Well, you know, what is interesting, Kathy, is in the immediate aftermath of Irma in particular, my officers, as I said, were out there straight away. And in part of the response was to, alongside military colleagues who came to the territory initially to support policing, we did a number of road checks. And during those times, we found several people with firearms in their vehicles. We also responded to reports of break-ins. There were some jewellery shops, for example, in Road Town being broken into, and again arrested people in possession of firearms. And we challenged people with firearms who were attempting to break into the port where the containers were. So it was widespread, as I say, in those first few days. But I guess the good news is that in a very short period of time we took several guns off the streets, and we arrested several offenders for possession of those weapons. But sadly, it goes back to the fact that it reflects there are a lot of firearms still on the streets here in Tortola and elsewhere in the Virgin Islands. And that means that, hurricane or not, we've still got work to do to stamp out that level of crime and to get a message out to people to say it is not acceptable to carry an illegal firearm on our streets. It's certainly not acceptable to ever use it. And, the full force of the law is going to be brought against you if you're caught. There's going to be no sympathy for people who say, well, I was scared, so I thought I'd better arm myself. I'm sorry, it's illegal, you're going to be dealt with.
Okay. And so what is one of the major concern that you would have at this particular time in the territory?
Well, as we're still getting back on our feet, of course, a lot of the roads, as you say, need repairs, and therefore, vehicles need to drive far more carefully. And of course, we've got several dangerous vehicles, as we've discussed out there. So that's an issue in itself. But also, of course, territory-wide, we still haven't got a full electricity supply on, which means that, once it gets dark, people start to feel vulnerable. People have still got a lot of damage to their homes. You only have to look around here, Kathy, to see tarpaulin on the roofs of homes which aren't particularly secure. So, of course, there is a curfew that we have to police. Currently, the curfew is 11 o'clock at night until 6 o'clock in the morning. And there's mixed feelings, I know, about that curfew. But what I will say is this. That curfew is assisting us in providing added security to the territory. We're not seeking to disrupt businesses who need to move about during the hours of darkness, but we are seeking to keep people safe in their homes of a night time. So there are a lot of police officers on the ground enforcing that curfew. And what we're finding, of course, is that the people who are in breach of the curfew, generally speaking, are found to be people who we know are criminals and are up to no good anyway. So it has given us an opportunity to tackle some of the criminals that have been moving about. But I think I want to put to bed one falsehood. People have assumed that crime has gone out of control here since the hurricane hit. And I'll be the first to admit, in the first couple of days after the hurricane, we were struggling to tackle the amount of looting that was going on. But since we've had reinforcements, since the force has got back on its feet, and since we placed the curfew, crime has actually dropped considerably across the territory. We are not getting serious offences reported to us. We are not getting the break-ins that we were seeing. That doesn't mean there's no crime, of course, and I, of course, encourage everybody to continue to report to us. And I recognise that the 911 system is still not up and functioning properly, but there are emergency numbers advertised by the mobile phone companies. Contact us, let us know what's going on out there, and we will come.
And that brings me to the point to find out, how are you doing administratively? I know for a fact that you've lost almost all of your vehicles, your offices. How are you doing administratively?
Well, our buildings were severely damaged like most people's, and probably about 50% of our vehicle fleet is either off the road or is being used in a damaged state. What that means, first of all, is that our visibility isn't as good as it could be, because you don't see us in the marked vehicles, and we'd only just had a new marked fleet arrive, which is very frustrating. And we've had to borrow a lot of vehicles or hire vehicles, so it's not obvious that police officers are about. But the point is we are, and we're about East, West, Central, Virgin Gorda, Jost Van Dyke, Anegada. We have police officers everywhere, plus additional officers, as I mentioned earlier, from the outside. And another thing I'd put to rest here now, the falsehood and the rumours that police officers ran and left the territory never happened. Never happened. We had a lot of officers that suffered severe damage to their homes, like everyone has, and had to sort their families out. But about 98% of the force are back working on duty at the moment, which is great news. I've had a couple of resignations, but great news. On top of that, our IT systems are at the moment struggling. We are still having difficulty in getting certain systems back online. So I've got to ask for patience from the public at the moment. I know there's been a lot of questions about visa waivers and about police certificates as examples. Our systems aren't functioning 100% at the moment, but we are taking applications. So don't feel that it's a waste of time submitting the application, but please be patient with us. It's going to take a lot longer than it normally would to process it.
Okay, any final words for the residents of the British Virgin Islands and the wider communities of the Caribbean?
Well, first of all, I'd like to thank the vast majority of people here who have held their head high and cooperated with law enforcement and with the security measures that we put in place in the territory, and that has contributed massively to keeping us safe. Secondly, I'd like to also thank those that have come along with information and intelligence that's assisted us to target and deal with criminals, and that very small group of people, as I say, who took advantage. And thirdly, I would say this. I think you should all be extremely proud. You know, I'm not a local. I don't come from the Virgin Islands, but I've got to say that I have been so impressed by the people who've lived here all their lives and the way they've dusted themselves down and looked around and said, okay, we can rebuild this. We can get back up on our feet. And I sincerely believe we can. And, you know, I've sat in meetings with Cabinet, with Government and with our Governor. And, you know, the plans are coming together. The Cabinet and the Premier and the Governor are working extremely hard to do that. And part of those plans are going to be about not only how do we rebuild the territory and make sure that tourism, we make sure that the financial industry are back working 100% here, but how do we make sure that we maintain security for the territory in the future? So we're not just going to rebuild the RVIPF to what we had, we're going to build a force for the future so that everybody knows that the BVIs is going to be the #1 location to come and see.
Okay, what a commitment there from the Commissioner of Police himself. Thank you so much. Kathy Richards with this JTV News Update.